Am I the a-hole for tipping 83 cents? All right, I've said it before. I love wedding posts, but I also love these posts about restaurants. I was in the restaurant industry for 10 years, so, I have a lot of opinions about it. So, I went out to dinner with my wife last night. When the bill came, I gave the waitress my card. She came back shortly after looking upset. She slapped the card down on the table and said, "Declined." Wrong. Okay, let me just preface this by saying nothing says that guests have to be nice, but they can't be horrible to staff. Like, you don't have to be talkative and all that. If you want to just come in, put your head down, eat a meal, and go, like, that's on you, boo. Like, that's totally fine. But you can't treat people with disrespect. You can't discriminate, harass, none of that, right? Same goes to the other side of people on the serving side. Unfortunately, you're in the business of serving people, so you don't get to be rude. Do I think there are certain situations where you can put people in their place? Absolutely. But I do not think that you should be rude. So, in this sense, already where she's slapping the card down on the table and saying declined, like, not necessary. It could literally be anything that declined the card. Maybe I've done this so many times where I lock my card because I can't find it somewhere. I find it and then I go to use it and it's like declined and I'm like, I have money in my account, and then I look and it's like, oh, my card's locked right now. So there could be literally any number of reasons why his card got declined. So to act like that off the bat is just no thank you. The other half of this though is sometimes it's all about perception, because sometimes on the customer side, they think something is happening, and it's really not. So, either way, let me stop going off on a tangent here. Let's just get to the actual question of the tipping, okay? Okay. So, I thought her tone and brevity was rude. I took out a different card from my wallet and handed it to her. While I was putting the first card in my wallet, she didn't move. I looked at her and said, "You okay?" She said, "If I go back and try and run this, are you still going to be sitting here when I get back?" I asked her if she thought her tone was appropriate for speaking to customers. She said, "You're only a customer if you pay." I asked to speak to her manager. Yikes. Alright, she left with the card. My wife said maybe the waitress had encountered scammers before and was anxious about it. I said, being rude and being cautious are two different things. The waitress returned with my card and the slip to fill out. She said, "This one worked. I'm sorry." So, yeah, that's another thing. I've never worked in a non-corporate restaurant, but in corporate restaurants, in the restaurant that I worked for, if somebody walks out on their tab, you get documented for it. So it gets put on a piece of paper that says, hey, this person had to walk out on this day. And it's because if somebody is actually stealing money, you kind of have a paper trail. But the other half of it, me being an empathetic person that I am, I always try to figure out what happened in the situation. I'm like, did they get up and literally run out the building? If a team member were to tell me that they saw these people literally run out of the building, somebody else confirms that, then I may have made a decision not to write them up. But, that's just me. But the point is, people like get scared of these types of situations because they're like, oh, I don't want to get written up for this. I don't want to lose my job over this. So I do understand her being scared, but again, treating them that way by slamming the card on the table and giving that tone was absolutely unnecessary. I thanked her and took the booklet. Our bill was $91.17. I wrote in 83 cents as the tip and $92 as the total. I handed it back to her and started to get up to leave. She said, "You're really not going to tip me?" I said, "No, you were rude to me." She said, "I have to tip out the bartender and the busboy. I just paid money to serve you." I said, "Well, in the future, you shouldn't be so rude." My wife thinks I was an a-hole to the waitress and should have given her $10 at least because it was an honest misunderstanding. I would have given her $28.83 if she wasn't rude to me, but I didn't want to pay to be insulted. Was I the a-hole? For the record, I called my bank and the card was flagged for fraud because of a pending $1 charge that is often associated with fraud attempts. I resolved it. Okay, there's a lot I have to unpack here. So, real quick, the part where he talks about his bank. This is something that a lot of people don't know, and this was like probably a good 40% of the headaches I dealt with in the restaurant industry, is that when you pay with your card will charge more money than what the bill is. for if you decide to leave a tip. So sometimes a pending charge will show for more money than you actually paid because it's pending. And then what will happen is once they put the tip in and the bank gets the information of what you actually paid, it will update in your account. But people don't seem to understand that. It's the same way when you get gas. You go to the gas station, it charges you $75 and you only got $20 because you didn't prepay. It's because it didn't know how much money you were going to be putting into the car. So it charges a larger amount, and then it'll go back and charge the correct amount. That's why it's called a pending charge. That means it's pending in the bank. It means it has not gone through in the bank, okay? And I get it's frustrating because even though it's pending, the money is still being held up and yada yada. Blah, 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 blah. That's not my problem. That's your bank's problem. Talk to your bank, okay? Anyway, I could go on about that all day. Reeling it back into the real problem here. So, I do actually, in this situation, think this guy was being a jerk. She was also being a jerk. And he responded with her being rude to being rude. So, I think there are also situations that call for that in a sense of maybe he wanted to teach her a lesson, XYZ, whatever. But I do think in these types of situations, you're still being an a-hole because depending on where you are, servers make $2.35 an hour. That's what servers in Kansas make. $2. Okay? And yes, they choose the job and blah, blah, blah. I don't need to get in a whole argument about tipping culture. Okay? But here is what I will say. That is how they make money to live, is off of tips. Okay? I think the proper response here would have been to tip her, but to report her behavior to a manager. And then the manager can do what he sees fit with that situation. But I still think you should pay her. I overtip in a lot of situations. It is very rare for me to only leave 20% as a tip. Okay? I always overtip. Now, if you didn't do a good job, I still will tip because when you've worked in a restaurant, you see what goes on behind the scenes. Some of that stuff that happens, like your food taking forever, blah, 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 is not the server's fault. It's literally every other thing, okay? And I'm tipping this person for the service they're giving me, yes. But if there are things out of their control, then it's not really their fault, right? Now, if I can see that you literally don't care about your job, if I can see that you're just... You literally could care less about taking care of my table, or doing your job, or getting things to me when I need them, or blah, 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 blah. So in this situation where she was being rude, then I would still only leave 20%, but I would report her to the manager. Because here's the deal. She needs to learn from this situation, absolutely. But it's not fair to just not pay somebody, okay? Because you can go anywhere else, any other business, have a terrible experience with somebody that works there, but still pay full price for whatever you did, right? You go to get your tires changed, and the person who changed your tires is a jerk the entire time, but they still changed your tires, so you're still going to pay them for their service, right? It should be the same way in the industry. Yes, it's not fair that they get to be whatever, but again, report them to the manager, and if you feel like that's how the staff is there or whatever, then don't go back to that restaurant and give that money your support, okay? Plain and simple. So, yes, I do think you were an a-hole for tipping only 83 cents. That is just my opinion. What I will also say is just kind of a slap in the face for the 83 cents, bro. Just don't tip me at all. Just zero. Move on with our lives rather than give me 83 cents, okay? That's just me. That's my opinion. I don't know about y'all. 83 cents is like a big FU, in my opinion. Anyway, what do y'all think?